even into regional issues, when you look at it, there have been a lot of leadership changes in SADC, with many of the liberation era leaders now gone. Do you feel lonely, or do you feel you're about to get lonely?
I don't feel lonely at all. There are lots of people who think as I do, and whose ideas I also share. I don't feel lonely. Yes, we have some younger people who are coming to the fore, but what one notices is the lack of courage. But we still need courage now. And what one notices is a kind of surrender to European authority, I suppose, because of poverty. And we withdraw or shrink in asserting our rights. Instead of asserting our rights, and instead of standing for that which is right, people shrink. Blair will say, after our elections here, which will have been supervised by the African Union, by SADC, by COMESA, by ECOWAS, all groupings in Africa, supervised also by individual countries who will have invited, by the non-aligned movement, by the ASEAN grouping, and countries we will have invited from the third world, Latin America, Asia. And all these will have pronounced the elections as having been held freely and fairly, and the result therefore being legitimate. No, says Blair. Yes, I agree with you. No, says Bush. We who are this far can see better what the Africans who are so close cannot see, they say. What's wrong with the Africans who cannot see things as clearly as we do, that the elections were not free and fair? And none of them will stand up and say, go to hell. Our judgment is final. Our eyes are as good as yours, if not better. They won't say that. They'll just keep quiet. And this baffles us, baffles me. We need much more courage in the African Union than the courage that's being demonstrated at the moment in the assertion of sovereign rights. We can't be slaves again, even intellectual slaves. No. They have had it. They have had that opportunity of, subjecting us to their will, using us as objects and turning us into, subhuman beings. But that chapter is gone, and we must raise our voices, and if necessary, our fists and box, fight for what we are. That's what our elders did. That's what we did as we fought. And that's what Mandela did when he was sent to Robben Island. And that's the fight we want to see in our people. Of course, they will say, we want to make friends. But you want to make friends, yes, on an equal basis, and not on a basis where you go down on your knees and beg. No.
You have strongly advocated for 2 permanent seats with veto power for Africa in a reformed United Nations. Does Africa's proposition have any takers? And do you see the 5 permanent members of the United Nations agreeing to give Africa?
We must be takers, genuine takers, courageous takers. They are our proposals, and we must stand by them vigorously, canvass for them. And our view, Zimbabwe's view, which was shared by others, is that we haven't, canvassed for them sufficiently. True, we can get support from the third world, and the third world is larger than the first world. There are 5 permanent members of the Security Council who wield the veto. Why can't we face them? See Bush and tell them we have the right as Africa to a seat, 2 seats, permanent seats in the Security Council. We hear what he says, why he would oppose it. And we would call him a racist if he does oppose that. We would call him as an unfair person, as an unjust person, as a person who wants us to continue as inferior in the world order. Go to Blair the same. I know the Russians would support us. Chirac probably would also support. The Chinese would support, except that they will insist on now denying Japan a seat. And they have their own historical fight with the Japanese. And of course they will always veto any proposal which includes the Japanese. And I don't see us fail. We may fail the first step, but that's not final. We must not accept that any judgment that is negative on the proposal as being, the end of everything. No, we raise the matter again. After all, this question is arising now because of the constant fight and constant prodding and debate we have had as the non-aligned grouping at the United Nations. We are the ones who have provoked this issue, and let us continue to uphold it, and not, surrender at all on a matter of principle.
Is the concept of democracy through the ballot merely a disguise for selfish national interests by the big powers?
The concept of democracy has nothing wrong with it, but the Western world has never wanted the developing world, after all, to enjoy democracy. And let's not forget that historically, you see, they have been our oppressors. They colonized us and dehumanized us. And in America, they have killed the Red Indians there, committed a lot of genocide in seizing their land and exploiting them. They did the same to blacks who they dragged onto the continent of America and treated like animals. And this is their history. This is the nature of the Westerners. Similar treatment occurred also in other areas by the British, by the French, by the Portuguese, Spanish. So they have that history. They don't respect us at all. And so the world order is an order where only the great ones the more highly developed would want, you see, to see their wishes, their own interests, raised high, and our own wishes, our own interests, you see, suppressed. That is the situation, and I think that is the situation that calls for us to fight it, and this is what I've been referring to as the injustice of the international order of today. And there is nothing which will accrue, nothing of benefit that will come our way if we expect that Vanna Bush, Vanna Blair will one day, through some magic, begin to regard us as equals. They don't. They don't. They will never do that. Never, ever will they do that. Now look at what has happened. Israel has been hammering the Palestinians without anyone making noise at all. And the Hamas take up arms in defense of their right. And in their own reckoning, the country where they are and where the Israelis are belongs to the Palestinians. This is their argument, yes. And they are regarded as a greater evil than the Israelis. Look at what happened to Yasser Arafat. Palestine, in which he was held a prisoner, where he was denied the right of movement, where even as he was ailing and he was in his deathbed, he could not travel to any part outside Palestine for treatment. Was it a Palestine of people who are regarded as equal as human beings to the Israelis across the River Jordan, to the Americans, to the Britons or the French? No. So they cannot have things of their own liking. And when they go to elections and win, America, Britain, and other European countries must judge those elections, not just in terms of the process as it will have gone, but also in terms of who has emerged as a winner. If the winner is not to their liking, then the elections will not have been free and fair. Our elections were not to their liking. And that's why they said they would not recognize us. But who are they at the end of the day to make that judgment over a sovereign country?
Given all this dehumanization and ill treatment of the Third World by the Americas and the Europeans, do you feel that there should be some form of compensation, or how should they be asked to compensate for the mistakes?
There are lots of things to compensate us for. Some people just think of slavery as they are having dehumanized us. But you see, slavery was not just on the continent of America or in the Caribbean. Slavery was also practiced here. They took our people across to the Americas, and here, back home, they colonized us and reduced us also to a form of slavery. In some cases, it was proper slavery. In others, they subjected us to a state of subhumance. They denied us the right of ownership of our country, of our resources, forced us to work for them, compulsory work, and even as gangsters, they organized labor gangs to work on certain projects. You take the railway system, this to Beira, Tare, Beira. You saw people who worked on it. They were forced to work on it. So were they forced to work on other programs in other areas, on farms? And even as they were enticed to work on farms or in the mines through little payment, they still were denied real rights as workers. Suffered, after working, say, for a period of 20 years and laboring for the master and getting old and now ailing, they looked back and said to themselves, we suffered for this man. But what do I leave my children? What do we leave our children? Nothing. And when they grew old, they were chased away from the farms or from the mining areas with nothing to hold on to, nothing to survive on. So it was slavery both ways. And this is it. That's the nature of the people. And if there is to be compensation, let's look at all that. Let's look at also what we have lost through colonization, through the exploitation of our resources, through the subhuman treatment that we got, even as we tried to wage a campaign, beginning with political campaigns, absolutely democratic, but agitating for equal treatment. No, we were arrested, put in prison. At the end of the day, no compensation for that. And of course, as we waged the liberation struggle, our people were herded like sheep, like goats into those villages, you see, and closed there where life was very difficult, and where even Vana, Sikana, Nana, Baba, Vana, Kumana slept together in the same camps. And so there is a lot of harm that in retrospect was done to Africans, and billions and billions of dollars or pounds really should be paid as by way of compensation. But of course there may be peculiar circumstances depending on the situations as they operated in the various places. But our lawyers could work on all that and demand compensation. It's an area we should look at. We talk of this compensation. Our brothers and sisters in America, regularly talk about the need for us to demand compensation, but apparently we have taken the subject without any real serious attention paid it, just brushed it aside.
We have seen Zimbabwe adopt a look east policy. The question is, does look east mean not looking west? And does Zimbabwe have any friends in the west?
Well, they tell me in geography that if you continue to look west, you suddenly find yourself looking, if you look east, you suddenly find yourself looking west, and vice versa. It is as because of the the rotation and the movement of the globe. That's it. But political, what we mean is, let us now recognize that our friends are in the third world, and most of the third world is east, and there has been development in the east, in China, in Singapore, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Thailand, in India, and so on. And let's work with those because they understand you better. Let's work with those because they are treated in the same way by the Westerners. Let's work in those because they have had a similar history as yours. They have been colonized before, and they know the evil mind of the West. So they are better friends anyway. They are the ones who assisted us to be free and to have our freedom and independence. So let us work with those who can assist us from the bottom of their heart, and not those who really would still want to be our masters. If they give you something, then they want to extract from you. You see, a part of your heart. They are Shylocks, you see, and that's not. Look at what they try to do with us. The IMF is an international organization to which the whole world belongs. But the British wanted to use the fact of our owing the IMF, the British and the Americans, to bring about, the change of the regime here. Squeeze us economically, so politically we could do the things that they want us to do. No other country has been treated that way, you see, because they owe. The IMF now must turn into a political instrument that can bring about the transformation that the erstwhile enemies, and as the erstwhile enemies as they are supported by America, would want to see happen in this country. But we saw through their machinations. We also realized that they wanted to use our neighbors, you see, in that strategy. We resisted it, and that's why we decided to find the money, and we found it here in Zimbabwe. We didn't borrow it. We didn't go out to ask for it. We could have done that, but we decided that we use our own money as earned by our own exporters and build up a fund. So Lagono and I worked on that, and we succeeded in raising the fund. We have now succeeded in clearing the debt that we owe to the IMF, directly to the IMF. There is still a debt that we owe two countries that have donated to another fund in the, but that is not a debt owed per se owed to the IMF per se. No, we owe it to various countries, but it's payable through the IMF. We'll be paying it in due course, and that is because we want to get rid of this problem of the IMF. The IMF, as I have said before, you see, as never, ever worked in the interests of Zimbabwe here. And we are not the only ones. Other countries will also say the IMF has never succeeded in providing solutions to their economics. But they cannot say the IMF has transformed itself into a political instrument in order to bring about change, political change in their countries. It's only in regard to Zimbabwe that the IMF became this political monster, you see, that we saw rearing ahead in order to consumers here.
If the IMF has transformed itself into an organization that has a clear political agenda against Zimbabwe, and the question is, with the timing also, Zimbabwe appears to be complying with the demands of an institution that is anti-Zimbabwean.
No, we are not.
We have paid back.
Yes, that's their money. If you borrow money even from the devil, you must know you are indebted to him. And it's his money. Otherwise, the devil would